Please welcome our Deputy Executive Director of Los Angeles Airports, Michael Duche, and we have the Managing Partner of Smart Monkeys, Stefan Villet. Got that? Almost. Good. And back to the stage, Marie Bazil from Moment Factory. Please welcome our next AOA recipients.
Well, thank you very much. What we want to go through is to talk a little bit about the program we went through at LAX. Now, we're a little bit difficult in that no one really ever buys a ticket to go to LAX, let's face it. That's not what people want to do. But what we wanted to try and do was at least create a better environment for those who are buying tickets that have to pass through LAX on their way to wherever their journey is. And it was a difficult place, and this project really gave us a great opportunity to try and elevate that passenger level of experience at the airport, given everything a passenger goes through these days, the amount of time you spend in an airport. We really needed to up our game, and we wanted to create it as a portal of choice for people when they're making an international activity. Now, hopefully we'll be able to migrate some of what you see here today back through some of the other terminals, but we'll go through a quick run through of this. Now, we're going to show a quick video. Hopefully it'll start here. It's narrated, so I'm going to be quiet here for a second.
Bradley International Terminal
so that you understand the scale of this program.
Inside the terminal, the largest media installation at any airport in the Americas. The goal? Enhance the passenger experience. Bring back the magic and romance of travel. The Time Tower is the centerpiece of the new terminal. It's constantly evolving, from an architectural icon to a tribute to the silent film era to an art piece that expresses a floating, dreamy time of travel. As the clock strikes the hour, an immersive moment of wonder that spreads to other features. Floating above the main hall as passengers enter, the storyboard tells atmospheric tales from Los Angeles and destinations both real and imagined. A new generation of departure displays, the destination board shows not just outbound flights, but also visualizations of real-time data from LAX destinations. The interactive portals react to passenger movements as people head to their gates. The artwork, music, and effects are linked to real-time flight data. They change to reflect the destinations of outbound flights. Arriving in Los Angeles, passengers are greeted by the Luminous welcome wall, an invigorating splash of energy 8 stories high. Just after the security lineups, the Bon Voyage wall is a moment of suspension that marks the transition into the terminal. 7 media features, 1 vision. A new kind of public space, a new form of brand experience, a place where passengers' journeys start long before they board their planes.
So, thank you. So with that, what we started with actually was the design of this building, and the charge we got was go out and design and construct an iconic building for the city of Los Angeles and the region. And so we had a building design, and you see the images, it's quite a striking building from the exterior, but what we came to realize was, the only way you see this is out the window of a plane. And so what was going to be the experience inside the building? And as we started to move through the process of thinking about how the building was going to operate and work, advertising components, we started to look at integrating that in a digital way, and also to create a passenger experience for everyone. And so what we try to do is come inside the building and start thinking about how is this going to manifest itself. And this is kind of a diagrammatic section through the building, starting out at the curb front and where you end up ultimately going to your gates. And given the resources we had, we tried to focus on where we're going to get the biggest bang for the buck. And quite honestly, we kind of cut them up into sections for each type of passenger activity, starting out at the curb, check-in, ultimately security. And we realized this is probably the most stressful area of the journey for most people. And all they want to do is really get through this as quickly as they can and get on to ensure that they're going to get to where their flight is. So we had a little less priority on this area of the building, although we're going to start slowly migrating back into that. And what we really focused on was, once you got through the security checkpoint, what you encountered as you were either waiting for your flight, trying to get something to eat, the entertainment, that kind of area. So we focused on what we called the Great Hall. But what we also wanted to create was zones where if you wanted to engage in this, you could. If you wanted to go out and sit by the gate in a quiet zone, you could do that. And so what we're trying to do is provide multiple areas for the passenger. I'll go real quickly through this. The thought was, we're going to look for sponsored type content. We're going to look for advertising. We're also going to look for how people can actually interact with this from a mobile basis. We're not quite there yet. We need to work through some of those challenges, but hopefully we'll get there. From the type of sources where we're going to get information and content for this, it was going to come from a number of places. One was going to be, we're going to create original content so that we'd have opening day content for this. We're going to look for the advertisers to create additional content as they move through the program. We were going to look for generational type content that we could just go out and import information. And then we're actually looking for, at one point, passengers to help with that content. Like I said, we're not quite there yet, but it focused around 4 major themes. The concept of time, journeys, destinations, and various stories. Kind of, you'll see some content that's a day in the life of Rio de Janeiro or Seoul, Korea, as you see those. And one thing I should mention, this is post-security, so it's very difficult for those to see. One thing most people aren't aware, if you got a boarding pass and you're at LAX on the day of travel, you can go through it. So if you want to see it, the best way to do this is on a day you're traveling, get there a little early, and as long as you're flying out on any of the airlines, you can go through security and actually see this out there. To talk about the 7 different features that are out there, you see 6 up here. The portals actually make up 2 of those. The way this started was, we came in, we made a pitch to the executive director of the airport. We looked at a number of concepts, probably about 60, focused down on these major 7 features and presented it in terms of the cost and what this was going to do in the experience. And it was kind of BS's worst hour, because we thought, okay, which 1 or 2 do they want? And they said, we'll take all 7. The problem was the building was already under construction. The steel was up. Everything, for those in the construction world, understood where we were in terms of the systems, the full design. We were in construction. The other edict we got was the date to open isn't going to change, so build them all, get them done, because we're going to have a grand opening that the mayor's going to be at, and you better finish. So we embarked on a very aggressive program to get this done. It started bringing in the talent, Mike Rubin with MRA, Digital Kitchen and Moment Factory doing content. Stefan, he's going to talk a little bit about, he was the lead technical designer for this. So we got everyone in a very cohesive team very quickly to get this going. To talk real quickly about what each of the features were, I'm going to talk a little bit about what the concept was, and Marie's going to talk a little bit about what the thoughts were in terms of developing content for it. As the video said, this was the departure board. What you see in the upper left-hand corner was the traditional train station board. And what we tried to do was create something that was a little bit more than that, but also give us the ability to bring that back, because there's a certain romance to train travel and seeing those boards. So we went through a number of iterative type concepts for what it was going to look like, ultimately settled on one. And what you see here is in real life, there's a couple different expressions for this, whether it's very conceptual looking or photographic imagery type oriented. In this case, Paris was probably the next flight up going. So I don't know.
So it was for destination board, what was really interesting, it was working with real data. because the notion of time was a big inspiration. When you're in the airport, sometimes you pass by a place, you don't even know what time it is in that country. You're kind of in the no man's land, and so we wanted to play with that notion of time. So it's really interesting to kind of get a grasp of what's going on at this time in LA, but at this exact time in Paris or in New York, anywhere else. So what we connect to real data that show winds, movement, weather, for example. So it really gives a notion of being grounded in that, and back to a notion of time.
The next major feature, what we refer to as the time tower, and that, once again, that essence of time was always very present in an airport. And it was kind of built around that theme, although the content has somewhat changed and morphed to encompass a lot of other more whimsical. This is actually an interactive component down at the bottom that the kids figure out after a while that they can go up and modify the images on the screen. But as we started out, it was just a glass elevator tower. Ultimately, after it was constructed, we ended up extending it up, adding steel, making it taller just to make the proportions work. But it's the centerpiece, and it's always, what we tried to create is that organizing place within it for people to meet. As you see, it's kind of like a village in there. It creates a very convenient component to say, well, when you're done shopping or eating, whatever, just meet me at the clock tower. And so that was part of the image as well that we tried to create by developing this component.
So yeah, because in the cities you see clock towers as gathering points. So the time towers was the most spectacular, gigantic feature. I think it's the most pixels in 3D that ever lived that we worked on. It was gigantic. So what do you do when you have a feature that is so big, so much in your face, because people are traveling? What we want to do is bring back the romance of traveling. We want to give like a spa-like experience. So it's all about suspending the time and really being so gentle about all the different scenes that we're bringing there, because that was one of the concerns we had from the beginning. There's so many pixels, it's so bright, it's so impressive. You can't use too much speed. You got to be really gentle in the way you approach the visuals.
And I think that was one of the challenges we really faced when the content started going up, was really how much we had to slow it down just so that we didn't create even or enhance that frantic feeling that passengers have. Part of this is just intended to be, a very calming influence for the traveling public as well as the employees. The next major feature we refer to as the storyboard, and it had various iterations. I think, like I said, we went through probably 30 different iterations and proportions of this. I'll be honest, the first one I went up kind of looked like Wheel of Fortune with just a bunch of little screens across there. But it slowly morphed into more of a mosaic. And the idea behind it was a little bit traditional Hollywood, the old storyboard aspect. How do you use multiple screens, or whether it's used in terms of one big image type of thing. And ultimately, this one, probably my favorite, but it is, I think it's 105 feet wide and about 35 feet tall. It's just an enormous screen that literally, when you see things like aircraft up there that are full size taking off, it does really enhance that image of you're at an airport. But
yeah, and it was the storyboard was about all those little stories that what make LA specific. So we did a lot of visuals of the city, of even clouds, and something that were a bit more generic, but that were part of the city, so that there was some kind of placemaking gesture here. People would feel they are in LA. But it was also important to start the idea that they would start traveling. People would start traveling already there at the airport. So we were bringing a lot of destinations. So we had the opportunity to travel to many different places to bring stories like Rio de Janeiro, Korea, South Africa.
Yeah, I mean, literally
Yeah.
the world.
Yeah.
We're able to put up, but I think it also gives us the opportunity. I think a lot of the wonderful things go up there are just localized content of the vistas of Los Angeles, whether it be Griffith Park or the Santa Monica Bay, the coastline, Palos Verdes, a number of things. It brings a lot of just localized content onto the screen that's very soothing. The next major feature is what we call the welcome wall, and this is really what arriving passengers see or welcomed into the country. This was originally supposed to be a waterfall, at least that's what the mayor wanted, and we didn't want water anywhere in the building. We don't handle it quite as well as the theme park industry. It tends to lead to rust and other things. So we just said, how about a digital waterfall? And so what we came up with was this enormous screen, like I said, about 80 feet tall, and it's tied to actually the passenger information or the flight information, so we can vary the content based on what flight's arriving in this. Actually, I have a flashback every time I look at this. If you look at the top left screen, you can barely see there's a kind of like a cage up there. That originally had a big glass enclosure around it with steel on it, and it was to separate different types of passengers, whether you were inbound, international versus departing. And when we put it up and we started having content go up, it formed just a huge impediment to this. And so we were about 3 weeks away from the opening, and I talked to the customs folks and got them to agree that we could take it down. So if you've ever seen the flame spread rating on these kinds of things and getting flame near LEDs, it's a really difficult thing. I went to the worst place possible, the artist, and said, what do you think? Should we cut this thing off? Because I knew I'd get the answer I really wanted. So we swaddled this whole thing in blankets, about 3 weeks, welding blankets, torched it off in the middle of the night. I think I went home, and then I came back about 3 in the morning expecting to see a mushroom cloud, a $2 billion mushroom cloud. That didn't happen, and so we survived, but I think when you actually see it in the space, it was well worth the effort.
So he was our hero for a long time.
I'm sorry?
You were our hero when you did that.
Yeah, I didn't want to see me throw up, so I went home and tossed and turned. And I just, like I said, lived south of the airport, and I literally drove over to a hill overlooking the airport at 3 in the morning and didn't see fire trucks nor a mushroom cloud. And I went back. And then about 3 weeks later, when the whole facility opened, I was walking through with the executive director and the mayor, and she said, what happened to the glass? And I said, well, we had a little problem with it, so we took it off. I didn't bother to tell her we were doing that. So that's the welcome wall.
Yeah, I think what we have to say about the welcome wall is it was so gigantic too in the space, and people passing by too. So it gave us the opportunity to work a lot with slow motion. So we've done a lot of shooting with the Phantom camera, using humans characters, but also a lot of just texture like that. The cascade that wanted the mayor became one of the main inspiration. So we played with water and Phantom camera, and that was fun.
Yeah, this we timed it. It's probably about a 25-second passenger journey, and so I think they worked really hard with the content to develop content that matched the length of time that people would typically be in those types of spaces. The next feature is, we call it the Bon Voyage wall. This is what you see immediately as you come out of security screening as you're moving in. It's only about a 10-second experience, depending, although what we get is a lot of people standing on the bridge just kind of looking and admiring the space. But what this was is just kind of the introduction into the grand hall.
Yeah, so that was a glimpse of something quite special is coming up, and so we don't have too many times this opportunity of really using that many feature in an environment. Usually, when the architectural concept comes, there's 10 features, and we end up with 2. But in that case, ending up with 7 features, we could really paint a scenario of, the user would start seeing that feature, then this feature. And so there was a whole, ecosystem that we had to create it. And this one was kind of the glimpse into the magic.
then, oh, those just some images of the varied images up there. And then the last two features, and they're identical. There's one on the north-south concourse, one on the south concourse, and they're just meant to be an introduction into the concourse down to where your flight is. I would say I think we probably struggled with this one the most in terms of coming up with content, but I think they did a fantastic job. When it finally all clicked, I think it's one of the most appropriate in terms of the content that ended up on them, and they are interactive features as well.
It's true. So, like those thin lines, it was hard to find great content that could fit on that. But I think it clicked when we realized it was such a passage. You know, when people go through the portals, usually they are ready to go to their gate. So it was about the travel, the destination, and all those details object. So here it's chords, and this is an interactive piece. So when you walk by, the chords, plays different sounds.
Yeah, and in this case, I was telling Marie earlier that this one happens to be tied, or it's all tied to the flight information system. In this case, we probably have Korean Airlines flying out of the South Concourse, and it was rewarding when I had a passenger come up to me and literally tears in his eyes because he recognized we had a wonderful person at Moment Factory who probably knows 700 different string instruments and can probably play them. Came up with this, and he said it was just a very traditional Korean element, and even the sound that came out of it, and it literally made him homesick. And when you see your passengers get that emotional when you see it, you know that it's probably been a success. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Svan, who's going to talk a little bit about the logistics of getting this thing designed and literally working.
So I got to tell you a little bit about what you don't see, which is what I'm more proud of. Usually nobody cares, but so that's the control room that you see here, because actually JC Deco, who has the contract for the advertisement over the entire property, is also the operator of the IMS system. So in this room, they can actually monitor, they can operate, they can schedule new content, put new content, and do all that kind of things. Now, on the left, what you see is actually the system. Yeah. So, obviously, you could think, well, it's basically playing video, and we just have to put it on big canvas, so it shouldn't be very difficult. Well, the thing is, when you want to create something that has that level of quality, because I think what we're trying to do here on all the levels is really to deliver a very high-quality experience, so people that are getting in the space feel great about it. They don't really think so much about being late for their plane, also they should, But so we needed to bring some technology that we actually choose from very different things. I'm not going to go too much into details. Don't want to bother you or bore you, but basically the network is a big part of it. We had to work with the IT department. And obviously, this is the front line in terms of knowledge, technical knowledge at the airport. So we had to understand how they worked, because sometimes it's a very different approach, for that type of environment compared to our theme park industry. So very significant installation. For pre-produced content, we're using a system which is really coming from the broadcast industry. This is the typical adjustment that you would see in a TV station. So it's pretty unusual for us. Then when it comes to generative content, interactive, we're looking at units that are more used in the live entertainment, all that kind of things, so we can produce content all by itself. We also have more simple digital signage units. Now what's interesting is that on some of the PCs, like the Time Tower, you could have actually the video playing out of the broadcast system. Then you would have the clock face, which is actually generative, to have the real time playing. And then we're using the digital signage to actually create a mask so we can blend all those together. So you're looking at 3 different systems that are working together to bring the experience. Everything goes into matricing system and to a quite powerful processing unit to the video wall. All of this is controlled with several machines, actually virtual machine inside a cluster. So we're bringing, again, technology that is used mainly into the IT environment. Now, that's the way people are actually using the space. Obviously, you need to have a very customized interface. Several challenges actually are very similar to what we can find into theme parks industry, for example. First of all, the property. It's big, there's a lot of people going there, and so you have to deal with it. The size and the resolution of the screens is very, very big. Reliability is very important. You can understand that if you have 100 TVs, for example, one goes down, okay, you can deal with it. When you have that big storyboard in the middle of the airport, you don't want it to go black for half an hour. So reliability is really important. Network security. You can imagine that in that type of environment, it's also a very hot topic. So we had to deal with that. We learned lots of things from dealing with that, and I think that can be applied into our world, the theme park industry. And obviously flexibility, operability, because again, who's operating the system is not necessarily as qualified as who designed the system. So I heard something during several of the sessions. It started with field demo, and I think it might be one of the reasons why some of the projects are presented to you today. I think it's the commitment from the client. Right from the start, we had Los Angeles World Airport who was committed to an idea, and they wanted to go all the way through the process, and they trusted all the team that worked onto the project. I think it's a very significant factor to the success of the project. So thank you.
Yeah. Oh, you got.
And so basically, but it's the same as what you presented. Basically, we started with this and ended up with that. So that's it.
Okay. Well, yeah, and I'm glad Stefan brought this up, because I want to leave this up during the question and answers, because I want to make sure that everyone recognizes who the team was and who really pulled this together, because, like I said, this was never really designed into the building when we started. This became I don't want to call it an afterthought, but it was developed partway through construction, and under very aggressive time frames and schedule and flexibility. I think the team did an unbelievable job to pull this off.
It looked like in one of the drawings you had of I think it was the Bon Voyage wall, which I think is the one that has the sort of tiles around it.
Yeah.
Like at one point that in the drawing, like maybe those were display surfaces and maybe they rotated or something like that. Is that something that made it to the final design?
No, it didn't. And actually, you saw 3 different versions. It was looked at as something that was rotating, but given the space that it's in, actually it's in a giant skylight space. It's about 105-foot ceilings. It would have created some unwanted attention away from what the actual screen was. And then, quite honestly, you saw different variations, because the one on the opening gala was because we didn't finish. And then we came back and ultimately put the glass up to get it done.
Bob Barnett, writer here. We like variety, but we also like certain rhythmic consistency and repetition. Is this on a complete cycle, or is there some variability that provides us a certain comfort level? Because there's a certain point I would imagine that could be visually overwhelming by just agitation, by seeing so much constantly changing.
It is. I mean, it does run on a cycle. One of the things we tried to develop was about 4 hours of content, because that's usually about as long as somebody's in that building. So that we didn't have repeat images on it. The idea was that we were hoping that we could interject new content, and I still think we're looking to do that on more of a interspersed basis. But I think that was part of the challenge, and Marie can speak to that, about the actual speed of it, which, as we were testing it, what we found out is it was actually visually overwhelming as originally intended, and there was a lot of work being done either to speed it up or slow it down, which had a huge impact on the feeling for the passengers.
We also developed a look that was very architectural for the Time Tower, which we called identity look. So in between, this look would come back more often. So you have the impression that this Time Tower is a tower of glass. It's like a kinetic architecture that opens and tells stories. So I think there was a lot of reflection about scheduling, and that was something we wanted, looks that would come back so people would feel, they comforting and not like your MTV kind of intro and all kind of beautiful images.
We have time for one more question.
With Wall Street Productions from Detroit, Michigan. Beautiful work. While I see you're using planar LCD display technology, can you speak about the presentation systems of the storyboard section and the Time Tower? Was there projection involved, and how did you overcome ambient light? Thank you.
No projection, all LCD 4 millimeters?
Well, it's LED tiles on.
LED 4 millimeters.
Yeah, I think they're actually, for the Time Tower, it varies. You saw a little smaller section below that had glass around it just to keep the passengers, quite honestly, from breaking it. Those are all 10 millimeter LED. Above that, it's 6 millimeter, and we actually manufactured or had corners manufactured, so it's not just two tiles buttoned together, it's actual corner piece. They were made by DAC Electronics. The storyboard was also 6 millimeter LED tiles.
So working with LED was really easy. We had even to tone it down, it's
Yeah.
like 15%.
So let's thank the team from the LAX project.